Awesome. Now, with that being said, now we can roll into kind of our conversation for tonight. Thanks everybody for joining me again for another Saturday night stream. I've got an amazing guest joining me for tonight. She's got an amazing career. Listen, when we talk about folks who have amazing careers, my guest tonight is literally right up there on there. She was doing a electronic warfare officer for the U.S. Army. She's spent time with FireEye. She spent time with Capital One. She's done some amazing work. She's held positions on boards of nonprofits providing tactical advice to reduce injury to women and children affected by sex trafficking. She's held executive leadership roles providing cybersecurity guidance to foreign leaders. She is an expert. She is an expert in military cyber policy and has led global development operations in cyber countermeasures to mitigate near-peer attacks. I mean, just that in and of itself is an amazing feat. She has nearly 17 years of experience, 17 young years of experience working in military operations where she's worked on a special unit that offered gender-specific intelligence and security solutions. She is committed her growth as a leader and is currently finishing her master's in cybersecurity risk management at Georgetown University. Throw the next round of hype hands together. Join me for my special guest, Jax Scott. Thank you so very much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. The floor is yours if you'd like to continue to introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about you.
Oh my God, I think you covered everything, Neil. This is amazing. I'm so excited to be here. I know I had actually turned down your invite a couple of times, and I finally got my courage and I decided to go ahead and accept the invite. And Lola got me locked in. So I'm really, really excited to be here. Yeah, you've said everything. You definitely emphasize the expert on cyber law and policy. So I hope I don't get too many questions on that.
You're gonna get quite a bit on me, especially on the cyber law side. We'll talk a little bit about that one. Listen, you say that you got the courage to come be on the show. I think what it really boils down to is I had to beg you. You're being nice by saying you needed the courage, but I literally had to call you up and say, Jax, please come on my show.
Yeah, it was definitely, I don't know why. I have my own, as you know, because you were a guest on our podcast. I have my own podcast, but it's just something different about what you do here and your following, and your community is so powerful. So I'm excited. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
It'll be fun.
We're glad to have you. Now you've got a podcast.
I do.
You just got done writing a book for Jerry. Like, Jerry says that he wrote it with you, but really you wrote Jerry's part of it as well.
I did. I was the best writer of all that. At least that's what the tech editor said. True story.
I totally believe that. I completely believe that. You are like, let's go to our notes here, right? You do you sit on a lot of board of director seats. You do a lot of volunteer work. You support a lot of the special, God, where is it? Where's my notes? There it is. You're the Cyber Mentor Project. You're the Women in Cybersecurity. You do a ton of extracurricular stuff. How do you balance it all?
Calendars, or now I just have one. When I worked at Capital One, I literally had two, because working at a bank, everything is extremely secured. I had to have two. I literally had two calendars, and I had one that I could merge on my company phone. And I time block like crazy. There are some things that I've just had to start saying no. And I'm one of those people that I'm very passionate about helping others, but sometimes I give too much. So I have to learn how to say no and make sure that I'm taking care of myself along the journey. But time blocking, yeah, I time block during the week. Monday through Fridays are usually my busiest, and I try to take the weekends off for the most part. Yeah.
Let's talk about that saying no, because that's obviously something I've talked a lot about, and I actually was mentoring somebody a little while ago who had recently been getting a lot of social attention, and he and I were talking about that ability to say no. What's been your mental health kind of journey, if you don't mind sharing it, in cybersecurity, in terms of, because I imagine since you do help a lot of people, you probably had some mental health woes that you had to come to the realization that you needed to start saying no to people for?
This is a great question, because I think that it's not touched on enough in the cybersecurity community, especially just talking about mental health. That topic, I actually just recently, during part of one of my one-on-ones with one of my employees, I brought up mental health. And so I want everybody listening right now to just want a blanket statement. There's nothing wrong with mental health. It's a statement, but we used to have a lot of negative connotations around saying mental health, but all it is taking care of yourself. And so for me, my mental health journey really started when I started transitioning out of the military in 15. So that, because of military deployments and combat, I didn't realize that I wasn't taking care of myself until around 18 or 19. But I will tell you, when I really came like headfirst into the cybersecurity industry around the end of 2019, that's when it was like the tip of the iceberg for me. And it happened right around Christmas time. It was when I was working at FireEye, and I was working 80, 90 hours a week to really just kind of grasp my job and understand it, like probably a lot of us do in this industry. And I hit a brick wall. It was probably either December or January. I think it was December, because it was slow enough that when I crashed and burned, I couldn't get out of bed. And so that was the point in time that I'm like, okay, I've got to start giving back to myself and start taking time off and it's okay to work long hours, and it's okay to push like 60 to 80 hours a week for small periods of time when you're working on a specific project. But then after that, it's okay to pull back. So my journey, it's been a long journey, but now for me, it was learning how to accept where I was and not feeling guilty for taking time off, and not feeling guilty when I wasn't doing something with my hands and being busy and always feeling like I needed to be productive. So that's been the biggest turning point for me.
I think it's important also to have that conversation as well, right? When we talk about one of the questions I get asked frequently, especially when we talk about like spending all this time in cybersecurity, is it still possible to stay abreast of all of the latest things that are going on in our industry when you force yourself to take a break like that?
God. Yes and no. That is so hard to say, because right now we haven't had a crazy cyber attack, but say that I took this week off and I went off the radar and I was hiking the Appalachian Trail and I came back and the Kaseya thing happened.
Yeah.
Then now I'm trying to catch up. So yes and no. Like, this week wasn't too bad, but what's going to happen next week? But that goes back to just having grace with yourself and being okay. Because in this industry, you're always going to be catching up. You're never going to be the smartest person in the room. You're never going to know everything. You're always going to be just a little bit behind, because the adversaries they're working so quickly. It's changing all the time. I just heard about a new ransomware, listening to CyberWire, that came out today, that is now being embedded into bootleg video games. Shocker. And so it's a new variant. Yeah. And I would have never known that, but it's not mainstream. And it was just something I heard because I was listening to CyberWire. Yeah.
And it comes at you that fast in this industry. There's just there's no way around it. How has that so again, like you, coming from the military, spent time at the agency doing intelligence work, for them, for the 315th, for the 91st and 92nd, things like that. The intelligence game is vastly different being in the service than being out of the service. What was that transition like for you, as you realized that you no longer were looking at intelligence one way and you had to look at intelligence another way?
It was like learning a new language in certain aspects, because it was how you wrote your reports, how you looked at it, how you were able to pull the data, what resources you did and you didn't have. For me, it was just learning a new language. And especially when I left the military and I came into, I'm also speaking from cyber threat intel, not just intel. And so it was a foreign language. I think that's why I dove so hard and started spending so many hours trying to learn it, because it was diversely different than what we did in the military. And you don't have as many permissions and authorities and all of those parameters. You have to be so careful with the word intelligence in the military. You can't even say OSINT. I forget that because I'm a National Guard soldier, and I'll go back and I can teach you guys how to leverage OSINT capabilities with open source tools. And they're like, oh, no. You can't say OSINT. You have to say publicly available information. PAI is what they utilize in the government. And you cannot, that's a no. Don't ever say OSINT in a DoD area. Everybody will freak out. Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. I just realized that's I'd forgotten all about that one. And also there's the there's the different tiers that they rank that level of information, whether it's classified or not, based on
Yep.
whether it's stuff that looks like normal traffic activity versus
Yep.
not. What about when it comes? You mentioned that difference as well when it comes to doing cyber intelligence versus doing normal intelligence. I think there's a huge distraction in the industry because we talk intelligence, but I don't think a lot of corporations have a really good grasp on what threat intelligence is. I had AJ Nash from Anomaly on, I think 3 weeks ago now. And that's a conversation that continues to come up when I bring intelligence folks on here. Things like priority intelligence requirements, things about writing strategic, operational, and tactical level intelligence at all different layers. How difficult has it been for you to see what you and I would consider to be the right way to do intelligence on the inside, and then to come out and watch companies fail at it miserably on the outside?
I think the biggest challenge that I have seen working with companies is they don't know what their intelligence requirement is. That's like the number one thing. You walk in, you ask them, what is your intelligence requirements? And they don't know. We need to know if the bad guy's going to attack us. Like they don't have, it's true though. They just want to be protected. They're like, we just want to be protected. My clients, when I was working heavy on the CTI side, they were Eastern Europe clients, and they had no idea. They just wanted to get information off of the adversaries, but they couldn't articulate what that looked like. So it's very different. We're in the military. I think because we have those parameters in place and it's just part of the process, you have that intelligence picture, you know how to develop it, and it's not as structured on the civilian side, even remotely. And to clarify too, like most of the intelligence work that I did as well was it was involved with the special ops, and it was very much like almost a social engineering in a way. I could not say that I was gathering intelligence off of the women and children when I was working in the Middle East, but that's what ideally I was doing because I was gathering information that then, turned into data that then became intelligence. But I would gather that information doing medical events or holding shuras, which are just basically large meetings with all of the women and children in these villages. And then I would bring supplies for them, school supplies, crayons, anything. And I would just start talking to them about what their needs were. Do you need a well? Do you need a school? And then I would just start getting information about them and start identifying patterns in the area. And then I would give all that information over to the intelligence cell. And then that's when it would be turned into intel. And then they would come back to me maybe with additional questions for me to go into the village and gather more information. And I worked with like the Department of Women Affairs, the DAWA, and I worked at the district government level, the DGov out there. And I would just do these events and these meetings, and I would just sit there and commune with them and talk to them. And that information that I got, I just gave it over to the intel guys, and I never asked anything really about it once it went to the intelligence sector.
And when you talk about that process, right, I think that's an important distinction to make. Now, talk about when you look at threat intelligence on the outside from vendors like FireEye or Anomaly or Record a Future, Risk IQ, how different is that intelligence gathering process, what we think about the commercialized threat intelligence world today?
So if you're looking at like FireEye's, it's first off, it's very strategic level. It's not tactical or actionable. I like using actionable intel. A lot of the intel, unless it's something very, very specific, but that's general, really, I feel like across the board in a lot of what we do, at least what my experience on the civilian side, on the private sector, is most of the intel that we get is after an attack has happened, then we get the IOCs, and then we create the intelligence from it. And now we've got this great intelligence, but you can't do anything with it. I've noticed that we don't answer the so what very well, but intelligence, at least in the special ops sector, it's critical. Intelligence drives the operations. Like we need that intelligence picture to be able to execute and move forward with operations. So it has to be actionable. And so there's a very, very clear delineation between the tactical and the tactical down here in the strategic level intel that I haven't really seen so much on the private sector. I see a lot of the higher level, not answering the so what, the pretty pictures. here's what happened, but we can't really do anything with it. Yeah, you can take the IOCs, you can ingest them into your SIM and help refine your alerting, but we're very reactive with our intel.
I think that's I want to piggyback. I want to pick on that just a little bit, because I think in our world, right, when I think of only being able to provide the IOCs and only getting IOCs from a lot of our threat intelligence vendors, feeding those into our SIMs, responding to incidents and things like that, I consider that very tactical level intelligence. And the lack of so what is because we fail to provide that high level strategic vision for a lot of folks. So it's interesting to hear you kind of draw that contrast on that, because I think we do tactical really well. I've challenged most of my challenge to threat intelligence vendors is that I think that they fail miserably at being able to provide strategic intelligence for corporations.
I think we both need to define on what we see as strategic versus tactical. I guess that would probably be
Go for it.
I think yeah, I think we just both have a different perspective on it. So when I look at a FireEye report, I review it, and it does a very good job at outlining the threats, providing some historical analysis around the threat, providing some IOCs. Like the most recent, well, I won't use that as an analogy, but yeah, I was like, no. But yeah, a lot of the reporting is this is good information. When the SolarWinds happened, they're typically one of the vendors that'll get a reporting out. But in my mind, what I look at, and it goes back to being in the SOF for so long, is when we would see intelligence, we would turn it around so quickly, and you would be able to identify that. We would get intelligence on, say, there was a terrorist element, a terrorist individual in a village, and we would be able to take that intel and execute and be able to do a concept of operation, get it approved, fly in, and embed into the village, and then be able to pull that guy out. And it would be a lot of successful missions. Not always 100%, but a lot of times, because we would be able to do it quickly enough from the intel that we got, and we could do 100%. Okay, that individual's there, let's go after him. I don't see that as much in the cyber world. Now it is a different battle space. So when I see the intel come in, I look at it and I'm like, okay, this attack already happened. Now we're recovering from it. We're writing the report. We're providing the IOCs. Yes, you're taking them and ingesting them into your system to refine your alerting, but the attack has already taken place. That IOC is not specific to any vulnerabilities that you have on your network. You're ingesting them to develop your TPs and your alerting on the system, but it's not meaning that it's going to actually protect your system, because a lot of times that we see adversaries burn their infrastructure once they get done utilizing it. So for them to reutilize an IOC that's on that list the likelihood is very slim. So that's where my mind comes in, where this is not you can't take very much action towards it. Yeah, there's some action. Absolutely. You can, like you said, you can ingest it, you can do certain things. So I can see where it can be actionable there, but I'm talking about us going after the adversary, us stopping it from happening. And we don't do that. We don't have that intel on the private sector side.
Wouldn't you argue that no private sector would ever have the mission of doing forward ops on cyber, right? That's not
yet.
Not yet? You think
but
so?
I think that it's something, not yet, but I think it's something we need. Why we're so offensive, we're so defensive. We're in a posture of reactionary. Do you think that and this is a question for you, because I'm like, are we ever going to be proactive? Or are we always going to be in a reactionary state in the cybersecurity?
If we're talking private sector, my bet,
yes.
Just from seeing the inside and the outside, will always be reactive. I don't think that there's ever a scenario where we'll ever be proactive. I can remember times where we sat around, our unit, and we talked about what it would be like to have the civilian sector being reactive to cyber threats. They don't have attribution. They don't know how to do attribution. They don't have burnable infrastructure like the NSA has. They don't have non-attrib spaces. They don't have massive networks where they're gathering real intelligence on a regular basis. And so it would be very, very detrimental to have a Microsoft and Abbott Laboratories, a Mondelez International, just companies that I've worked for in the past, to have a policy that says if we get attacked by dark side, we're going to turn around and attack their infrastructure. I don't think that that's, on top of that, I don't think that that's something that if we get back to a return on investment conversation with the shareholders, that they would necessarily see as a good use of shareholder money to attack adversaries. That's not in their business model. And so I think that I think we will always ever be reactive on the private side. That's kind of how I feel. But when I take the pause there, I think about like the alternative scenarios, right, Jax? Like if we think about like how Russia and China do it, where they employ civilian forces to kind of work on their behest. I have railed since being out of the military on friends that I've got still in that sector where we don't do enough of that, where we don't as a country ask our civilian hacking force to participate in those battles with us. That's the only time that I could ever see if we could ever overcome that to get to that position.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen us do like an actual legit offensive cyber operation. It's so hard to get those approved. And this is all obviously public sector.
Right.
But and if it does happen, we're not going to know about it. It's going to be something through the NSA or another agency that we don't even probably know about. Yeah, so we don't know what the future is going to be. Quantum computing is coming out. I think a lot of things that we know right now for our threatscape, they're going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be something new. So I'm not ruling out us having a tool that's going to allow us to be proactive hunters. I believe it'll happen. I don't think we're capable of doing it now, but we're going to have to eventually get there or figure out a new solution quickly because of the direction that we're going and how the adversaries are evolving so rapidly. Like, what are we supposed to do? The cat and mouse, I feel like the mouse is getting further away from the cat, or it seems. And I mean, that's a gray area because I've been asked, are the ransomwares becoming more prevalent, or is it just becoming more of a news, like it's a news rage? Instead of COVID, we're talking about ransomware right now. And I think it's twofold. I think that they are actually having more news lines about ransomware, but I don't know what the stats are. I don't know if they've really increased. I know that a lot of these vendors that are finally coming out and a lot of these organizations, they were breached months ago and now they're coming out about it. Who's to say? It's a very interesting time though.
Yeah, I think the proactive thing, I think, and BSEG makes a good point here from a comment perspective, right? The private side will not be proactive when it comes to cyber because it would put them even more so on the map for an attack. I think that we see enough of that mentality, when it comes to, hey, I'm not going to disclose my breach or I'm not going to make a statement on a vulnerability. I can remember when I was at Abbott, when WannaCry came out, they refused to put a simple, banner up on their site like everybody else was doing that says, we have evaluated our systems and we are not vulnerable to WannaCry, out of fear of drawing attention to themselves to continue to get hacked. I think that, plus I think we struggle enough to be proactive on our threat detection side in the private sector, let alone, any type of offensive cyber operation. It would just never happen.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation. It's going to be interesting. I think how we know the threatscape right now is just going to drastically change in the next 3 to 5 years, and we're either going to have to figure it out or be playing catch up. See what happens. Yeah, so, you can tell China and Russia are ready to take us out. So we'll see what happens.
Well, on that note, I can remember you mentioned getting out in 2015. I think is what you said when you got out.
Yeah, from active duty. I still do National Guard, but yeah, that was in 2015. Mm-hmm.
So in 2013, when I got out, I immediately, having worked inside, went out to like FBI InfraGard when I worked at FIS to build their red team, because I thought, hey, if we can work with the FBI on the private sector, then that increases our intelligence information, at our fingertips as much as possible. I found out that was an incredible waste of time and it was completely useless to partner with the FBI for InfraGard. And I've been completely upset with the lack of cooperation that exists between the private sector and the government when it comes to intelligence gathering, up until these last 18 months, where we've seen, U.S. Cyber Command, we've seen CISA, we've seen a lot more disclosure of likely attacks and disclosure of vulnerabilities that have come from U.S. Cyber Command, CISA, and things like that. Do you think that is a sign that they're changing their mentality on the frequency in which they need to share threat intelligence with the private sector?
The reason that they're changing their approach by sharing is they know that there is a need for it, but even more so than that, no, these government agencies are not going to share unless they're going to be forced to. So if you read the executive order in May, if you're familiar with it at all, that was one of the big things, a unified approach to data sharing. And the executive order, for anybody that's listening, that came out in May, I encourage you to, I wrote about it in my blog, but it really covered and it focused on the DoD side of cyber. It really didn't cover on the private sector. And it said it was bold strategies, but really it was everything we should have already been doing with multi-factor authentication and data sharing. So that is what's going to push them. They have to be compliant. I think they have either 60 to 180 days to get there. But it is crucial for us as a nation to be able to be successful to fight our adversaries. We need a unified approach. And we need to do it first by stepping into data sharing. I don't know what that looks like, but it is something like you brought it up at the start of this. How different was it going from, the military into the civilian sector? And I mentioned just briefly the systems alone, the data that I could see on the systems that we had when I worked on the military side to here is drastically different. But then trying to get that access as a civilian is nearly impossible unless you're sponsored to have a clearance. So we've got to figure out a solution to that, because I know some of the data that's where it's going to become very challenging. Is we want to share data, we don't want to have this unified approach, but how are you going to share TS, top secret information with civilians without clearances? And those are expensive to get and they take years to acquire. And so what is that going to look like? I don't know. I wish I could be part of that think tank, because I would have some really good ideas, but we're going to have to cross that bridge. And thankfully, because of President Biden, that is something that will be forced for the agencies to start doing. And there was something that actually just came out. I know it was NSA, and I think they were sharing with Microsoft. They were doing a data sharing, and it just came out in the last few days. I think it was actually Wednesday or Tuesday of this week, where they started talking about how they're going to start sharing more data. I don't know what that is. That could have been just like, a TLP White report that they created that was really unclassified. Hey, look, we're doing our good deed and we're sharing data, put it in the news so we look like we have show of faith. Who knows?
Well, and one thing you kind of glossed over it, but I want to really, really harp on this for folks who are listening. Right, when we think IOCs, right, as a pre-indicator to an attack, getting those into the hands of the private sector from a TS down to the private sector, that will never happen. Like, I'm going to be completely cynical and say that will never happen, because those IOCs came from compromised infrastructure, intelligence gathering techniques, and therefore the NSA or CIA, any of the .ints that are out there, are not going to allow that to translate down into the private sector, because it will disclose something that has been wrapped in heavy classification. Black Knight T2 says, has the government helped out? Has the government help out more due to the target of where the attack hit, i.e. the infrastructure? Basically saying, is the help because of where the attack is going? And if it was attacking an insurance company, we'd probably see less help from the NSA versus if it was attacking Colonial Pipeline or something like that.
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, why for the government, we have to remember that the government, even though we think it's this big organization with plethoras of money, they still have minimal manning, and their time is also just as limited. So for them to try to go after every single attack that may happen, it's going to be very challenging. They're going to look at the bigger ones that have the most impact, and then do the analysis and go in there on those. So yeah, if it's an insurance company, I think size is going to matter. Colonial Pipelines was a big thing. We have 16 critical types of infrastructure in America. They're going to focus on those 16, and then maybe a sprinkle of other things that are out there. But yeah, their time is limited, and they're going after a lot of things right now.
And make no mistake, they have a hard enough time doing the offensive operations that they have in queue right now.
Yes. I think people forget about that. Like, they are extremely overworked many of times. They're understaffed. It's hard to get people that have the right qualifications and can get cleared. And they're always looking for people. And if anybody on here has got a clearance and wants to work in a dark closet, hey, they're hiring. You just need a full scope poly, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. The full scope's not the problem. It's the lifestyle one that'll make you feel dirty.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
It's the lifestyle that'll make you feel dirty when you get done with it.
Oh, God.
Callie Beefcake says, should our agencies act on behalf of our businesses for offensive security?
No, that's a touchy area because now you're getting into, I say no, because so that's a slippery slope. And the reason I say that is many times the government leverages, and I have to be careful how I say this, but many times when there is a national disaster that happens, if you pay attention, there is usually a law that is enacted shortly after it. Like 9/11, we had one of what was the 9/11 law? After 9/11.
Patriot Act?
Thank you. The Patriot Act came out. If you read that, which I did because I'm a cyber nerd and I love law and stuff, if you actually dig into it and you do a Control F, you will start to see, and what was the key word? It was for their capability to be able to monitor and listen to phone conversations. And if you go through it, it was a way for them to take the national disaster to be able to leverage to create a law to go in and not take away some of our privacy, but you have to give up some privacy for them to be able to protect us. So it's a slippery slope. If you start letting the agencies start coming in on your behalf, then the law is going to start shifting to allow them to naturally do that. And therefore you as a private entity have less and less control. So it's like the cell phone thing, like, yes, they're protecting us, but you have to give up a little bit. So then it's part of the law. So if you get into attack and you don't want the agency to come in, well, now they have a law enacted and they have to come in and they need to seize your network and go in and do the vulnerability assessment. So I would say, no, they should not. I think that there should be, again, a unified approach to taking on these type of things. And I think the larger organizations are going to be able to protect themselves much easier than the small business organizations. And those are going to be the ones that are going to need the most assistance that you would see like an agency come in and try to protect. But those are also the ones that need more of their autonomy as a business.
Let's flip this around a little bit, because recently when the exchange vulnerabilities happened, we had heard that the FBI had reached out and automatically patched a couple of those exchange vulnerabilities that were out there as well. So maybe not necessarily in the context of offensive security, but what about defending the nation? What's kind of your take on the FBI kind of stepping in, getting a judge's approval to patch systems in our own country?
So those were wild. They actually did it a couple of times, and then they did it in Europe. And I thought, gosh, that one even I'm toyed with. I think it's awesome that they did that, because they went in, they were able to patch the systems, and they were able to prevent an attack from happening. But they didn't actually even tell the organization till after it happened. So they were monitoring, they were already on their network. So when I read that, my first instinct was like, oh my gosh, you just like violated so many different laws. But they just saved the company from a possible catastrophic breach. And Neil, when I read this and then I read about the one that happened in Europe, I'm still torn, because I think what they did was right. But then you're in that gray area of, but you didn't even tell me you were coming on. Because I was thinking as a business owner, I'm like, how would I feel if I knew you came onto my network and you had been on my network for 30 to 60 days? Yes, you saved me from the breach, but you were on my network. I would be thankful and also upset. So that's tough for me. I still don't know how I feel about it, because I would be grateful. Yeah, cool. That's great. But I would almost want to say, why didn't you come to me and tell me and allow me to fix it, but then you're still on my network? I don't know. It's so, what are your thoughts on it?
But that's kind of the thing though, right? Because it's like, it's a touchy subject. It is. Let's think about it from, like, I'll put my business hat on, and maybe I've been out of the military for too long, right? I mean, it's been since 2013 since I wore the uniform. But I think about it from a business perspective. What if you'd crashed my Exchange server? What if you'd brought business downtime by patching that vulnerability? Like, who am I suing at that point in time? Like, what if you bring down my Exchange server? My IT team goes in there and looks, and they're like, who applied this patch? Why did this patch get applied? What's going on here? Let's revert back. Let's follow our disaster recovery procedures. And then they put the vulnerable server back up online. And now you're actually fighting with the FBI, who's trying to patch your server as you're trying to get business operation up and running, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's and then it gets back to kind of your point about giving up some level of privacy as a private organization when you know that the government is taking steps on your behalf to patch your stuff and making you more secure. So it's I too, when I've got asked this question on stream, have struggled with an answer to it, because it's like, man, that is such a gray space to be in.
It is. Yeah, that's a tough one. That really, really is a tough one. And have you heard, I haven't seen anything come out about a legislation or a law or a bill talking about what they're going to do in the future. I feel like that happened and then nobody said anything about it. It was kind of like, oh, it happened. Thank you so much. Who knows what it happened at the C level about that situation. And then they went on their way. Yeah, it's weird.
I've not heard anybody saying that. I get asked to be on news stations for Akamai going down, but I don't get a conversation about why the FBI patched, some companies' Exchange servers without asking for permission.
And nothing happened. Like, they did it. They went on their way. Like, if it was you or me, if we were like, if I was skilled enough to do that and I went in there as like a company that was, hey, I saw this vulnerability. I went in, I patched it. Here you go. Everything's good. I'm not even going to bill you. They would freak out.
FBI be knocking on your door. Everybody.
Exactly.
Oh, 100%.
So that's where I have an issue is like the FBI can do it though. So isn't that crossing a line then? So I get back into the privacy thing, but I think, it won't be answered here, but it's definitely something that I've been thinking about. I don't know. It's a gray area.
Chandy Bing follows up with, speaking of the private industry attacking their adversaries at a business model, what if the Fed side contracted a private entity to do the offensive if the private industry has the tools capable of what the Fed is interested in? I'll let you have this one, Jax. You can take this question right here.
Yeah, so that is something that you see actually more often than not. And what it'll be is a subcontract. And so they would bring them in, and that could be possible. And I honestly, again, I don't know what the NSA and some of these agencies are doing on the offensive side, because that's where these operations are taking place. But I would not be surprised at all if they already have contractors, because that's what it is. It would be a contractor that would be coming in. It would be a private entity contracted in to be working for them. And the reason they do that is because it's typically cost, and then it's resources, and then you're going to get an additional skill set. So you're going to be bringing in people, just like we do in the military. You're going to be bringing in people from like a FireEye or a CrowdStrike or anything like that. You're going to bring them in and then contract them to the company. I wouldn't be surprised if it's already happening, to be honest with you.
You don't think that the Title 10, Title 50 lines get blurred a little bit when you start asking, third-party contractors to do certain parts of offensive cyber? I can remember being inside, like that was the whole reason why you couldn't have contractors do Title 10 or Title 50 missions. You could have them do Title 10 missions. You can only have GS folks and uniform wearers do the Title 50 missions. And so, like, I think that's where that line gets really, really blurred, is when you start talking about what mission it is that they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's where you honestly have to sit down with the contract. But I'm trying to remember, there was a way of blending them, but you had to be on another set of titles, because you have Title 52, Title 10, Title 32. Isn't there like another?
You think of Title 18, the one that the CIA operates under?
Yes. Yeah, so I think there's another title, but that's for it. Like, it has to have, it's a presidential one. You have to have it approved, and then you're moved into that. So there's something for that. Yeah. The military, the government, not the military, but the government has definitely thought of a way. But it's all under titles, because you have to protect yourself. You have to have the right authorities and permissions before you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope even in that realm, though.
Yep. The military doesn't touch offensive cyber operations. From my side, again, it'll be agency, and you'll be really high in secret squirrel with that lifestyle poly that you're talking about to be doing those type of operations. Yeah.
BSET comes to us and says, if companies are doing the intelligence wrong, how do we get them to understand how to do it correctly?
Yeah, that is such a great question. So education, education, education. And you can do it by use cases. If there is intelligence that you're receiving that is not what you deem as right, you need to provide an example of what you deem it as right and show that comparison, but realize they're probably not going to get it the first time around. I see it all the time. Example is electronic warfare in the military. Nobody still knows what we do in the Army for electronic warfare. And you just have to show them. You have to show them over and over again. That's how it is with leadership. So educate, educate, educate. And then when you think they've got it, I promise you they probably only have it 20%. You have to re-educate. It's a change. We've got to start doing it slowly to start seeing that change. In the Intel community, I see a huge shift starting to happen. The intel that we see now, I truly believe it's going to have to change in the next 3 to 5 years, just with how we're going with the adversary. Our intelligence is going to have to become more creative and more actionable for us to be continually able to defeat and defend ourselves.
Is that because what do you think the biggest gap is currently to being able to gather the right type of intelligence? Is it the TAO not being able to get access to the right areas? Is it the adversaries getting smarter with how they hide their intelligence? Is it encryption? Like, what do you think the challenge currently exists for the intelligence community to gather good cyber intelligence is?
Oh, that is super complex. So we'll just take, because you could do the private sector and then you could do the public sector on this, because they're both going to have different answers. The thing that we have to remember is our adversaries don't have permissions and authorities that they have to abide by. They don't have any laws. They are the law. They create it. They do whatever they want. So that's the first thing. So they can circumvent and they can hide however they want. Where the United States, if you're looking at, let's talk about the public sector, you have a lot of authorities and permissions. Typically, it depends on your team and the capabilities that they have for research capabilities. I don't know if you've worked in like a cyber team, but you have a couple of senior guys and most of the team is a lot of junior guys. So being able to pull that intelligence, you might get some good, but you're not going to get the level of maybe somebody that's been doing it right out of college working at FireEye for the last 15 years. So you've got talent is something that is hard to find. Like good talent is something that's hard to find in the public sector, because a skill like that, you're going to get paid double to triple on the civilian side. And then on the civilian side, it all depends on what the mission set is. I don't know, like FireEye, because that's where my background is, working there, we had special projects. So we had a unit or a cell that would go forth and create really good intel. But the rest of FireEye is doing other operations, doing consulting work, working on client sites. So intel as a whole, it's ever changing. It's really hard to grasp. It's really hard to go after. And it's even harder when you have different types of parameters than the adversary does. Than you. Like, our hands are tied in so many ways, and they're just out there like partying it up, doing their thing, whatever. Yeah, like living life.
Absolutely, and I think it does make it a lot harder, both on the private and the public sector, when it comes to gathering good intelligence. Let's talk really quick about careers in threat intelligence. Since you did kind of talk about the difference between an intelligence analyst in the military versus intelligence analysts on the private sector and things like that. And I'm a huge fan of threes. One of the things I always do on the streams, right, is always give me the top 3 things, right? So give me real quick for the audience the top 3 things that you think that somebody who's listening right now wants to be a cyber threat intelligence on the outside for the private sector, not for the military or the government or anything like that. What are the top 3 skills that they need to know to be good or to get into kind of that cyber threat intelligence realm?
Writing. You need to be good to be it's critical that you can tell the story. So that is something that I witness when somebody cannot write very well. It's very hard for the reader to understand what the story is. And that's critical, because some of the products you're going to be delivering are going to go to higher leadership. So start working on your writing and telling stories. Be creative. Being an analyst is an art. And it is, You need to understand that when you're developing that story, it's all about being creative. So finding the lines and answering that so what. So be creative on how you go after that adversary, how you do your research to develop that story. And then the third thing, and this is really just an all-encompassing because it's hard. I'm trying to think of a third one that's like spot on, because in my journey, hold on, I'm going to think of a really good third one, because I'm like,
if I had it queued up, I'd play the Jeopardy tune for you, but I don't have that one queued up just yet.
What is? What is? They always do the questions. It always confused me. I would say take a CTI course. I mean, that's basic, and not like a SANS one. Go to Udemy, understand, because in the CTI course, yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Because you need to understand the framework. You need to understand, like, what is the kill chain? What is the pyramid of pain? What is the MITRE ATT&CK framework? There's one more. What is the diamond model?
Yeah.
You need to understand the 3 F's: find, fix, finish. Those are critical as part of your research. So when you have that, that's foundational. Then you understand, you bring your creative side in to be able to, because it's all about investigations, understanding, being creative. Like when you hit like a brick wall, you need to figure out another way of like pivoting. Pivoting is huge. And then from there, you need to tell the story. So those are the 3 things that I would say that I leverage those skills all the time. And I always use MITRE. I think MITRE's just become a bigger and bigger thing nowadays, especially with all the TTPs.
I will remind everybody that you can hit that exclamation Attack IQ. You can go take the free MITRE training from Attack IQ, which is really, really awesome for MITRE. And I've done a stream on MITRE as well. I'll probably do some more of that in the future. But MITRE is, I would agree with you, Jax. It's becoming so critical to almost every conversation now. I think it's still challenging though, because I think we still see a lot of software vendors, and I pick on, partners of this stream. Carbon Black is one, Attack IQ is one, where I don't see them implementing MITRE in their technologies in a way that actually makes it actionable for a lot of analysts, and whether you're on the SOC side or whatever the case is. So I'm not sure if you've seen anything like that in your passing as well.
I will say that when I was working at Capital One, we used Anomaly, and they did use the MITRE ATT&CK, and FireEye, obviously we use the MITRE ATT&CK. I haven't really experienced a company. I know there's companies out there that will leverage a different framework, but when I came to the civilian side, when I started learning about the MITRE ATT&CK, that's all I do now. And so far, every company I've been to utilizes it. If you don't, I don't understand why you wouldn't, to be honest with you. It layers so well with the cyber kill chain, and really all of them. Why wouldn't you use the MITRE? Just like that should be default as part of what you're doing in your investigation, in my mind. But yeah.
I've always equated like kill chain is great for you to think strategically about how you're doing cyber defense from the boundary to the endpoint. MITRE is awesome from an investigative perspective to figure out how you're going to implement specific controls at different layers in your network. Yep. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And you can layer those. That's why they're so good. But yeah, if you want to dive deep and understand what is happening, what is the threat actor actually doing on your network, MITRE ATT&CK is awesome. But knowing that's why understanding and knowing that, you can couple that with the cyber attack or the cyber kill chain, and then you can refine your alerting and do behavioral tweaks in your alerting to get better alerting for your overall SOC environment, for example. Yeah.
No, I want to pivot on you really quick. We've kind of gone, and again, keep the questions coming from chat. Chat will keep the questions coming with, government intelligence, cyber attacks and things like that. I want to pivot on you really quick and talk about, a couple edgy topics that we have in cybersecurity while I've got your attention. You mentioned spending some time in Afghanistan, and you did a lot of work in Afghanistan. You mentioned roughly about some of the intelligence work that you're doing. What was the biggest challenge that you encountered being a female being deployed to Afghanistan?
Learning how to pee standing up. I swear. They actually gave us a Shiwi device. You guys can Google it, but it was really hard. I actually had to practice for a while, but it was harder than I thought. I actually did not seal it properly, and I accidentally peed on myself, and I couldn't change my pants for 2 nights. And so I just wore soiled pants for 2 nights. So I learned very quickly.
And this, everybody, is why it's real conversations with real people. We go from military cyber to peeing on yourself in the desert.
Yeah, it was real life. Yep, 2 nights, because it was a 3-night operation, and didn't get an exfil till like 2 nights later. It was terrible. But anyway, so outside of that, I will say the biggest thing was knowing, because I guess for me, I grew up with all males. And so I had my mindset was really different when I went into those camps. And you embed, so just to paint the picture for everyone, when I deployed forward, I wasn't on a big compound. I was on multiple different small compounds. For example, one of the compounds I was on, there was only 12 of us, and we're in the middle of northern Afghanistan, and there were 12 of us, period, on the entire compound, and I was the token woman. And our security was 2 Afghan local police and some HESCO barrier walls around our facility. And that was it. And I mean, if we got attacked and taken over, it would have been done. And so the biggest thing that I had to learn, and I think it was just a natural thing as I went in there, is you have to work twice as hard to get half the credit as a woman. And before I had even deployed, I went through a special forces selection process. So I knew I was qualified and I knew I was worthy to be there, but that didn't matter. In the special forces, they have a saying, even after you get out of selection, you're selected. Selection never ends. And so when you deploy forward, you're still working out, you're still at your best, you're still educating yourself. And when I deployed forward, it was just a fact of you had to work twice as hard. You had to get up. And if you weren't an electrician, become an electrician, because they needed an electrician on the compound. You had to burn the poop, and what's like, that's a way you get the burn pits. It was a small compound. You had to do all of the things. You had to cook, you had to, figure out a way of being like the guys, but not lose your femininity. So it was a really interesting time. I know a lot of women that struggled. I thrived. I think I thrived because I cared what they thought, because a lot of them didn't want us there. My partner and I got kicked off a lot of compounds because we were just a woman, and the SF guys didn't want us there. So they would come in and kick us off, and we'd have to go to another team.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was definitely brutal, but there was one team that I got attached to, and I'm still good friends with the commander today. And I spent 7 months with them, and I never left. And that was one of the operations. I did 20 combat operations with them. So we would actually fly in with the cover of darkness, and we'd fly in with about 5 helos. 2 would land on up on the mountains. 2 would be forward deployed, and then our main element. And we would go in and we'd start clearing compounds during the middle of the night. And I would be working. Initially, I started in the rear on the first 2 operations for assessment by my commander. And then after that, I was in the front main elements working with, there would be usually 2 U.S. Special Forces, and then the rest would be the Afghan commandos. Mm-hmm. And we would go into the compounds and we'd clear. And then during the day, we would take over a compound and sleep. And then we would move at night. And that would typically go on for about 2 to 3 nights. And then we'd fly out the next day after about the 3rd night. And we get kilo resupplies of food. And I hunkered down on what my job was. I knew the asset that I was to the team, and I just hunkered down. But it was realizing you're a token woman out here. And most of my operations, it was just me and my interpreter. That was it. I didn't have another team member, because she actually tore both of her MCLs on an operation. And I did the majority of my ops all by myself. And so I had to learn how to pee standing up, because we laugh, but honestly, before that, I had to take a security guy with me to go around the HESCO walls to do all the things. And I would take a security guy with me and take him away from the stack, and they could just go off to the side and do their business. So I had to learn how to do that with a device, just so I could operate and be in kit and be at the same level as them. But it's again, going back to not losing your femininity. So any women that are listening to this, especially joining the cybersecurity industry, I just want to tell you, yes, it's male dominated, but you don't have to lose your femininity. You can still be a woman and express yourselves and realize you can be at that level. But I can't wait till we're at a point too in our culture where the women don't have to feel like they have to work twice as hard to get half that credit. I think we're getting closer. I really do. I think that there's a lot of equality. But yeah, don't lose that was the struggle for me, trying to find that balance of being like not too masculine and being a woman at the same time.
I want to kind of make that transition too, because that's a fascinating story, and much props to you, much respect for you for maintaining that. Do you see the same problems that struggle to maintain your femininity, or how has that transition been? Were you shocked at that still lack of, I don't want to call it respect, but just the inability for the industry to accept you for what you were, the need to work twice as hard? How has that struggle been, going from special ops, knowing you had to do it because that was special ops, it was male dominated, etc., to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I notice, unfortunately, that is still a struggle that is taking place today in the cybersecurity industry. And I'm surprised by it because I guess I didn't expect it. And it hit me in a way that I didn't realize, because I thought that there would be more equality than there was. But what I think that I'm starting to realize is that it's actually not different. It's just perspectives, and it's a different environment. And I think that I just allowed it in the SF because it's the SF. It's a male dominated industry. They're just allowing women in. But that's still very similar in cybersecurity if you think about it. I mean, I think it was 3 to 5 years ago, it was primarily males, and I think 11 or 15% were women, and now we're at 25% women. So we're growing, but it was surprising to me. I've had my own personal struggles still, and I still get that differential treatment because I'm a woman, where a male could do the same exact thing that I did, but I'm being reprimanded because I'm a woman, or I'm having a talking to because I'm a woman.
If you're comfortable, if you're comfortable, can you share those with the audience, just so they can be aware of like some of those things that are actually really happening out there?
Yeah, so there was a situation where there was a male individual that was posting things on their social media platforms, and he was not being scrutinized for it at all. And the data that he was sharing was related to the business. And it was, in a way, it was kind of frustrating the marketing team, but he wasn't being reprimanded for it. It was fine. He wasn't getting approved by the marketing team. Things were well. But when I made a post, or when I wanted to do things on my platform, I had more scrutiny. I had a lot more scrutiny about what I wanted to do, live stream, sharing an article that I wrote on my own that wasn't racy, but it was just very informational. I was told some of the words that were used was, this needs to be reviewed by marketing, and we'd like to hold off on like doing this so it's a little bit more polished. And I'm like, I'm thinking like, but he's doing this and it's not definitely polished, but I have to wait and I have to have it vetted and I need it polished. And that definitely took me back. And that was recent. And so I'm just like, wow. So it's not, but you just have to bounce back like that. So I always, when I say a problem about that, I don't want to have anybody on here being like, oh man, because I'm not a victim. Right. I hate that. But I did look at that, and it was definitely unfortunate. And I just recognized it, and I was like, well, things haven't fully changed.
Well, on that same note about being a victim, like one of the things that we're huge on here is bringing awareness to it. I can honestly say that I've had conversations where people have said, there's these things that happen out in the industry that you don't know are sexist until somebody points them out. And I'll give you an example. We had a very wonderful woman recruiter come on the stream several months ago, and when I asked her where she thought this whole this whole sexism in our industry started, was when we started putting black hoodies as representation of hackers out there, and it instantly became a masculine symbol, and that's what kind of started that sexism in our industry. If you had to talk to people and say like, here are some things that you need to be aware of that you're doing that are sexist in our industry, that they may not necessarily know that they're doing, what would some of those things be?
Mm. Neil, the problem is you can talk to these, let's just call them the individuals. You can talk to these individuals, but the problem is it's an unconscious bias. And I honestly don't know how we're going to get around that because it's unconsciously happening. And so you can talk to them about it and ask them to, and my approach would say, the next time that you want to address a woman about something, because the thing is, we don't want them to be, I say gun shy. We use it in the military as like gun shy, trying to avoid something. But you don't want them to be gun shy talking to a woman or overthinking, well, am I being like an unconscious bias? So you have to be careful. It's like a really careful area to draw. But I would say take a step back and think about, am I addressing her because of an unconscious bias, because she is a woman and I expect like polished and this and all of these things because she's a woman? And then I would ask, would you do the exact same thing to the male? And if they would say no, then there's your answer. And that's what our society has to start doing, is they have to start taking a step back and looking, would I ask the exact same thing that I'm asking her that I would ask of him, or vice versa, however it would work. But that's where I would start. But it's the unconscious bias, and it's so hard to change the unconscious mind because we're unconscious about it. We're not even conscious that we're doing it. And that's why I don't really take it too personal, because I'm like, it's not me that they're attacking. It's just it's the woman. It's the unconscious bias that happens. And it's a real thing.
How in your mind, like, you get a magic wand today, right? You get a magic wand today to solve all of cybersecurity's problems. What is it that we have to do to bring more diversity into cybersecurity and to try to encourage that influx, to bring that closer to a 50-50 when it comes to that diversity number?
Oh, wow. Mentor more minorities, mentor more people that are bringing in that diversity. I mean, I love my white males. I feel bad for you all because you've been targeted out so terribly bad in the last couple of years. But we need all of you. That's what drives me crazy. I am that like hippie. I really am. It's like we need everybody. But if we want to draw diversity, the way of doing that is because I'm a person that I'm not going to just hire you because of diversity, because you're an Indian or because you're a woman or because you're a Black. I'm going to hire you because you have the right skill set, and maybe you're not 100% on your skill set, but I know that I can mentor you because you have the right soft skills. And so mentorship and teaching are critical for us to start bringing more minorities into this sector, because it can be really intimidating to come into the sector as a minority. And we just got to start embracing it. But we can't just hire to hire either. That happens as well. Yeah.
I don't share, but I have been a victim of that. It's a story I could tell the community some other time, but I've actually been.
No, share, Neil.
I was going up for a CISO role. And I was the incumbent for a CISO role. And what ended up happening was I got told, not now, and said, now's not the right time for you to be there. And I thought I was just getting mentorship advice for my leadership team. And come to find out 6 months later, after they had hired a diverse candidate, that the 3 selections for CISO were diverse candidates.
Yep. Yeah. You guys are getting it rough too, because that's happening as well. Is the white males are being skipped because they want diversity. So that's where that's hard for me too. There's got to be a balance in there as well, and you got to look at your candidates, and if the other ones are a little bit better than you, okay, then they get it. But if it's just because they're diverse, that's the wrong answer as well. We're not giving them the right message in that area.
I agree with that.
That sucks. But you're in a better spot now, so there you go.
Oh, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. But it was the first time. It was the first time being on the receiving end of that.
Yep.
And it felt bad. It felt bad, right? Because you get that sense from your leadership that they're looking out for you. They're like, okay, this isn't the right time. This is good. They're going to hire they've got somebody lined up who's the best candidate. And then to find out the selection was all diversity definitely gets to feeling like there wasn't even a chance there, to do that. So yeah, I can empathize with that. Last thing on that one, right? You are very successful, right? We've talked about your success here on stream. You know, the podcast, the book, the author. You know, we haven't got into your company yet. We can hit on that a little bit later. But you've had a very, very successful career. It does put you obviously in a position to be a role model for other ladies who are currently considering a career in cyber. So for those ladies who are out there that are considering a career in cyber, you know, based on your experience, what advices would you give them?
First of all, I would say reach out. I will mentor you. I never turn anybody away. Reach out, ask me any questions. I know it can be like a scary place. And I would say find your circle, like find your trust circle, your tribe, and then lean into them. I have such an amazing group of women in my life. And there has been some really amazing things that have happened in my life in the last few days. And I have reached out to them and they have supported me 110%. And you need that, especially in this industry, just in life in general. But there's times where, like that comment I mentioned about the polishing and the post, I reached out to one of my girlfriends. I had to vent. Women, we all have to vent.
That's right.
And it just reminds me that I'm not alone because we all have similar stories. So find your circle, find your tribe, and then get a mentor and somebody that you trust, that you can be vulnerable with and lean into them. But if anybody wants to reach out to me for the mentorship, I will never turn anybody away. Strangers message me on LinkedIn, and I may not have the time to sit down with them for a full hour, 30 minutes sometimes, but there have been times where I've just linked people up that I knew two people would work well together for somebody reaching out to me. And they've so far all flourished, and I love it because that's what this industry is about, mentorship.
For those who are curious, you can hit !guest in chat to get access to Jax's LinkedIn. And I did tag her in a tweet today. Do make sure you go out and follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter. Jax, very nice of you to offer up that mentorship for everybody listening. Thank you. Looks like Fasoshi came through with a question. Question for Jax. If you had to start over, what would you do different?
Read. I would read a lot more. I would. I was so stubborn, and I don't know why, but I thought I didn't need to read or I didn't need to listen to podcasts. And I just wish that I had read more. I wish I had educated myself more. And I would just tell everybody now, just read and educate yourself. You're never going to be too smart. Yeah.
Is there top 3 books that you would recommend everybody read? There goes that three again.
Yeah,
you cannot include your book. I'll give a plug for your book later.
Dang it. I was like, that's going to be one. Ooh, that's hilarious. Dang. All right. So Never Eat Alone. It is an amazing networking book and time management. I love it. Changed my life. Emotional EQ. I think that is critical, especially in this industry, because we need to understand how to just be able to communicate and understand body language. And now the third one, since you took that one away from me, oh man, that's going to be tough. I'm scrolling through my brain right now to see which one I want to give everybody. God, I don't know. I read so many different books all the time that I'm like, I don't know. What would my third one be now? Shoot. Emotionally. Oh, How to Get Things Done. There's a book, and I can't remember what the author is, but How to Get Things Done. And it goes into learning about time management and just time blocking. Because I think in this industry, we can get really overwhelmed. And that's something I always train. I literally sit down with my employees when I get them, and I teach them time management, because you need to have research time. You need to have study time. You need to have lunch. So, yeah. I think, since I can't give my third one, but yeah.
I'll give you a chance to plug your book a little bit later on here a little bit. No, I think that those are good. The books are helpful, because I know there's a lot of people who, want to know some of these softer side of skill things, and sometimes those books are just really crushing it. Rodney Rollo says, what skills would you like to see a candidate has for a threat intel role coming from an IT background?
Oh, yeah, that's such a great question. And I would have questions for you. I'd be like, well, how many years? What is the role? Is it a junior? Is it a mid? Like,
See, there goes
so let's
that analyst mentality right there. Like, no, 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 no. You don't get to ask me questions on stream because I'm going to ask you questions.
yeah, like it depends on the role. Like the skills would really be dependent on the role. But okay, so as an interviewer, um, soft skills are so critical. Like you can come in with the best resume and have an extremely robust background, but I need to know that you can communicate. You have really good soft skills. You're easy to get along with. You just like you enjoy life, things like that. That's honestly that goes so much farther sometimes than coming in with the best resume. And that would be for any of the levels that I would be looking for. But overall, encompassing, I don't think that's what he was asking though. But he's like, dang it. But I would say, so for a junior, if it was a junior with an IT background, what I'd like to make sure that you understood, the OSI model. So I might ask a question on that, knowing that you had an IT background. And then I might start to ask you questions on how you would leverage IOCs, domains, things like that. I might ask you, I'm really big on asking like scenario-based questions because I want to test your knowledge. And now that I know like you have an IT background, I might ask you some questions to see what your knowledge base is on the IT side to be able to leverage certain bits of like IOCs and how you would pivot. Yeah.
When we talk about soft skills, and we harp a lot about soft skills on this stream quite a bit, but people don't there isn't exactly a book that says like how to build your soft skills. Somebody wants to go out tomorrow and start working on their soft skills. How do they do it?
Read emotional EQ.
Okay.
Yes. Read emotional EQ. Take the test. There's a test. Take a test. Identify what your EQ is. That is going to go so far because you'll be able to see, can you read body language? Because if you can't read the audience, you're probably not going to do very good in an interview because you're not going to know who the type of personalities. Like certain personalities, you need to be like very vibrant and forthcoming with, and others, they just want you to come straight to the point. So emotional EQ.
Nice. Fasochi comes through, says, what has been the hardest for you transitioning from service to cyber?
Oh, that's an easy one. It would be, for me, it was the communication. It was coming from soft background and being like this hard charging woman that could say, do anything, to coming to the military side or coming to the civilian side and realizing that certain things that I say are not taken the exact same way as they are in the military.
How many people did you cuss out before you realized that you couldn't talk to them like that on the private side?
Oh, and it wasn't so much, the cussing out, but it would be like things that I would say that people are like, did she just say that? I don't think you can say that. I was like, oh, and I read, my audience, and I'm like, ooh, okay. Literally, it was like one mistake after another. I was like, oh, can't say that.
Can't say that. What was the did you ever hit that? Did you ever hit that point? I think what got me right was I was an NCO when I got out, and so I was used to having airmen and whatnot work for me. And that realization for me that I couldn't tell somebody what to do and they had to do it. You had to learn how to drive change through influence. That was it for me. So was that something that you had to come to grips with as well?
Well, when I first got out and I moved into my fire eye position, I wasn't in a leadership position. So I had to quickly learn how to take, we'll say, commands from a 27-year-old who didn't have any military background. And I'm like, you want me to do what? And I'm like, yeah, and they had no military background. They were, straight out of college. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, and you don't want to make them feel like an idiot, but I'm asking all these questions because I want to make sure that I'm clear on their, it's super weird. It was so weird. It was like, but I didn't have a problem with lead or following that. I didn't have a problem with, I just had a problem with the leadership because I'm like, I was so used to a certain caliber of leadership. And then moving into that role, I was like, this is awkward and super weird. And at Capital One, I was autonomous. I was my own lead, and everybody just kind of left me alone. And that's when I had to start realizing that leadership, though, on the civilian side was through influence.
Yeah.
And so it's actually, I won't say it's easy for me, but for me, it's about relationships. And I garner influence through relationships, and I get to know my people. I want to talk to you. I want to know what you do on the weekend. What are your challenges? How can I support you? Once you start communicating, you're able to garner that relationship and that influence naturally where they want to follow you. And so I actually love it on the civilian side because you don't have that intimacy in that relationship so much on the military side.
I can empathize with that wholeheartedly because and I tell people this very frequently. As a matter of fact, I was literally just talking to somebody working for me here recently that it's all about the relationships. Like, it's such a relationship driven business being on the outside. It makes life so much easier.
Yeah, it does. I love it. I don't want to go back to the military ever again full time. And now that I've dove in, because when I got out in 15, so everybody knows, I wasn't in the corporate world. I was running. First, I had helped a friend of mine who was a Delta Force operator start his own company. So it was a whole bunch of special operators, and then me. And we launched a company together. And then in 16, I launched my own defense contracting firm, Outpost Gray. So I had a whole bunch of operators working for me. And then I got deployed in 2019 to support the special ops in Europe. And then from there, that's when I went into FireEye. And so I literally started my corporate journey at the end of 2019, like real corporate America. And that's where it was. I sort of started it in 15 because I had some employees that were civilians. But it really started in 19. I was like head first into it. I was like, "Oh, this is corporate America."
different.
Like,
We got to get you away from DC though, so you're still like away from all of that stuff.
Everybody told me that. They're like, "Oh, poor soul. You don't even know that there's another like
that's right
world." You're like you went head first into like DC land. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Rody Rollo says, what did you study in order to move from a military intel role to a civilian intel role?
Yeah, that's great. Nothing. So I honestly
there's no difference. Cyber secrets, y'all. There's no difference.
Oh my God. There is a difference, but I was very fortunate. Full transparency, I was deployed to Eastern Europe working operations in 19 as a cyber electronic warfare planner. And I was assisting host nation partners in developing their posture for near peer resistance, basically, of what was going on. And we all know what's going on out there. And when I came back, I was afforded the opportunity to work at FireEye. And that's where I dove headfirst in. I think that's why I said earlier, my learning curve was so hard because mine was on the job training, OJT. Like, I had to learn it. I picked up books, again, the reading thing again. I picked up books and I started just trying to understand the intelligence framework on the civilian side versus the military side. And I used a ton of Google. So you're like, what did you study? I studied Google.
Yeah.
I literally constantly was just reading. I was asking questions. I had agencies and bureau guys working for me, and their understanding and how they utilize intelligence is even different than in the soft environment. And it's wild. And I would just say Google, lots of Google.
Lots of Google.
Don't do what I did. It was hard.
It's amazing how like we share frequently on this stream, right? Like, there's so many resources that are out there for people to study about this stuff. There isn't, like, the cyber secret is that there isn't any secret to learning this stuff. It's all out there. Would you have a tendency to agree or disagree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I wish there was a one-stop shop and I could tell you a book to read, but there's so many different books, and depending on who's writing it and what the premise is of the book, you're going to get different context, and it may only cover like this much of the overall spectrum of intel. It's just so broad and complex. It's so hard to say, where did you study and what did you study? I would say focus in on the areas that you enjoy and then just start researching. I love Intel so much that I just applied to pivot my major in cyber at Georgetown into their intelligence program. And I'm actually waiting to hear back from the dean. if I was selected into the program, so I can pivot into their intel. And they have courses like their senior analyst course teaches you how to leverage information off of TikTok to understand how ISIS utilizes it for information operations. And so, like, that's another world. Like, information operations is another entirely different animal to even get involved with on the intel side.
My when I went to Herbert Field, my duty station was an information warfare squadron, and seeing all that information warfare stuff before I went into cyber warfare, I was like, oh boy, I think I just found my new home.
Isn't it wild?
Yeah.
It is so wild. And when you know that, you look at everything that you see online with just different lenses. Everything. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, I don't know if you felt like this. I don't know if you felt like this or not, but I can definitively say that, like, of everything that I've ever learned anywhere, the scope and feel that I have for geopolitical involvement and how different countries talk to other countries, and for instance, like, we would never source an attack on Al Qaeda in Iraq from Jordan because of the sensitive political ties that exist. Like, that entire geopolitical landscape was something that I never even knew existed until I was in an intel squadron and I was doing cyber warfare. And then you realize just how complicated the world is in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 110%. There's always an agenda for the news. Yeah. And I'm not meaning that as like fake news or anything like that. I think that, the data that comes out, there is some really good information, but like you're saying, you have a different lens and you look at everything differently. You try to figure out what the agenda is behind everything that you're seeing. Honestly, I don't have a TV. I own no TV in my condo. Because I want to filter what I read and what I see, and I utilize specific news sources. It's mostly cyber news. And then, I will not watch CNN. I won't watch Fox. I won't watch certain things like that. It's because it's filtered. It's filtered with a specific agenda. And it's really interesting.
It's crazy how that works out. Callie, who is also one of my interns, he's doing a great job, is over there. Says, how do you think the private sector can effectively share threat intelligence to help more threat intelligence preventive versus reactive?
That is a tough one because we've been talking about how the private sector, most of their threat intel is going to be reactionary because of how their sourcing is. I think this is a think tank question for sure. This would be something where, because this is what we were talking about earlier, the unified approach of data sharing, for us to possibly get into like a proactive stance to go after our adversaries instead of a reactionary. But to do that, you would have to be so careful with the data, because if you divulge that a campaign, the infrastructure and the domains and the staging, the staging domains and all of the data around where an adversary is sitting and waiting and posturing, and they're beaconing to a certain networks, but they haven't, started distributing their malware from their staging sites. If you start putting that out into the open, well, now you've just it's like a sting operation when the FBI goes and tries to bust a drug lord and somebody else messes it up. So you've got to have kid gloves with that. But that's where our data sharing has to happen in a way where, I don't know, maybe it's over a secured line where you have that data and you can share it, and it's with an agency where they can assist with stopping an attack before it happens. I mean, I would imagine that something like that is already happening at certain agency levels.
Well, but see, I guess I would challenge this on the flip side. Let me know what your thoughts on this are. I don't think it's possible for the private sector to have threat intelligence that is valuable to the public sector. I don't think they don't understand it. They don't have the infrastructure. The legal team wouldn't even allow them to share it. And I've been part of those discussions with legal teams where we've tried to even share it with peer companies in our own industry. I don't think the private sector would even have an infrastructure capable of supporting that type of sharing of threat intelligence.
Yeah, that I didn't even think about the legal, but you're absolutely right. I think that this question would be an ad hoc. It would be I say this, I shouldn't, but it's the guy in the basement with the hoodie. It would be that one individual that, is on the net all the time, the dark web, gets some information and is able to submit it to an agency. But outside of that, I don't think it would be something that would be continuously happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a difficult
Many
time.
ramifications.
I had a difficult time at one of the companies that I worked at. I tried to. They were for me with ISACs. I've been part of the FS ISAC, been part of the energy sector ISAC. I'd gotten with one of the companies I worked at to be part of the healthcare ISAC, and the healthcare ISAC was a travesty. It was just a total disaster. And so we were trying to be the leader to transform the healthcare ISAC, and part of that was trying to get legal to agree for us to share intelligence in those ISAC channels that we would gather and try to put out there. And that conversation, I never in my mind hated legal more than trying to get them to allow me to share IOCs with other peer companies.
It's a really good point. Yeah, I love ISACs. Actually, we had the FS ISAC, and I would go in there almost daily when I worked at Capital One, and it was fairly good information. I
The
enjoyed
FS
it.
ISAC is still the best out there.
Is it? Okay, that's the only one that I'm actually really privy to, and I know a lot about. I know there's a military one. I haven't actually got on that one. FS ISAC was awesome.
Yeah, I think FS ISAC was awesome. I think the energy sector ISAC was coming in a close second because they were getting a lot of pressure for NERC at the time. I think you see those ISACs come up as their respective industries start to take cybersecurity more and more seriously, and healthcare just is still lagging behind on everything.
Which blows my mind because that's one of the most targeted industries. Industries. It's an industry.
Yeah. No, 100%. I did a pen test one time where I intercepted messaging for Epic systems on a hospital, and I went back and said, "Hey, look, you need to start encrypting all this, this PII that's being transited between the Epic systems and the MRI machines, X-ray machines, things like that." And they're like, "No, we're good, we're good." And I'm
Oh
just
my
like,
God. Yeah.
"How is this a thing? How is this a thing?" Yeah.
So let me ask you a question though. Why do you think that is? Like, I don't understand why. Is it because are they state operated or federally funded? I know some are, and then you've got private hospitals. Is that what the issue is? And so they're kind of like how we see in the DoD, where they just turn a blind eye because they don't really have the funding.
Oh,
and they're like, oh no.
It's A, of funding, and it's B, it's cultural. So the funding part of it comes in the sense that some are state funded, some are privately funded. Yep. And so depending on where your funding source gets from, that affects obviously the budget you put towards cybersecurity. But you've got the same thing in hospitals that you've got in some of the control systems on the critical infrastructure side, where it's like, hey, I'm gonna put this MRI machine in, and then you can't touch it. You can't do anything with it. You can't upgrade it. You can't patch it. You can't put it behind a VPN. You can't VLAN it out. You can't do any of that stuff, because if you do, I'm not going to support it, and this $1.5 million, $2 million piece of equipment is now unsupported by the vendor, and so that poses a problem for them. And then you've got systems like Epic that want to make them so integratable, multi-integratable, like however you want to call that, between like just all the different vendors that are out there, that they can't standardize on an encryption technology for transmission protocols. God, who ever heard of TLS or SSL or anything like that for transmission protocol? But they can't decide on a transmission protocol to keep it encrypted, and so they just leave the traffic open to go between systems. It's literally one of the most asinine things I've ever encountered in my entire career.
Oh my God! Wow!
Yeah.
Wow! I bet they have cyber. I bet their cyber insurance is high if they've got it. Yeah.
Do you you said cyber insurance? Do you partake in the cyber insurance conversation?
A little. So interesting thing. Somebody tried to recruit me in 2018 when I still lived out in Vegas running my company for cyber insurance. And I thought it was just garbage. I was like, whatever, that's not going to go anywhere. Who's going to buy cyber insurance? And now like,
you're like, hold on. Can I go back in time to that?
Seriously, I'm just like blown away that people are actually buying it. I get it. I mean, But now we're running into like issues because, you know, companies are like, they're not in compliance yet. They're getting breached, and the insurance companies don't have good underwriters, and they're going to have to fix that and all that. So that's something I'm actually kind of toying with my new company, not getting into insurance, not getting into it, have no desire for that, but being a liaison, bridging that gap between the insurance companies and the organizations, and being like the consultant for the organizations to help them with trusted vendors, but help the organizations identify and help them do an audit on their system to make sure they're compliant for like the underwriters for the insurance policy. Because I think that cybersecurity, I mean, that's tough because it's not like a car wreck where you're only paying a few $1,000s. Like, we're looking at millions and millions of dollars when a breach happens.
And trying to determine likelihood on that?
That's the thing, right? How do you determine that even before that they bought the insurance, that they weren't already breached? There wasn't a back door. There wasn't already something there's all these factors, because you could bring in an IR person, pen testing, whoever. They come in, they do the vulnerability assessment. They give them a clean bill of record, but maybe that wasn't a trained enough person, because we've seen that in the industry. We're hurting. So not everybody is to that top tier level, but the insurance company is relying on that person. Maybe there's a back end relationship between those two companies. Like, there's a myriad of things that I've thought about that I'm like, I would not want to be in cyber insurance. It's just,
it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your fees have to be super high it has to be like $500 to $1,000 a month, or even more, depending on your size. And your insurance policy. Yeah. No desire.
Yeah. Gray Hatter goes back, I think, kind of to our proactive conversation that we were having earlier. How do you ethically act proactively on an adversary before they demonstrate they're a threat?
Yeah, so he's coming from the place of like thinking, we're crossing, if we're working across the ocean, so we're conducting operations to spy on an adversary. We can't do that legally. You can't monitor unless you have the permissions and authorities, unless you're a government agency and you've got it. And so I think that's where the ethics are going to lie. Is a private organization isn't going to have the same ethical parameters and laws, because ethics a lot of times in the military are defined by the laws that we have to abide by. And if we break those laws, then we're not acting ethically. But with the government, those laws sometimes turn into like certain titles that you have, certain authorities and permissions that you have. And that's where you have to make sure you're within your parameters. Otherwise, you're acting unethically and outside of your parameters of law. And then, you're definitely not doing the right thing. That's why, going back to that last question, it's going to be very difficult for a private sector entity to provide intelligence that would be helpful for the public sector, because they would be falling outside of those ethical lines.
I don't see that ever happening.
It's not that.
Yeah. Does the U.S. political model put us at a disadvantage to other nation states like China? And I just want to remind chat, right, it's okay to talk cyber strategy, cyber theory, cyber warfare, things like that. Just stay away from politics. Let's keep chat above board on the on the political spectrum. But Jax, your take on this one?
Yeah, so we have to remember, this is like apples and oranges. We're dealing with China, who's like People's Republic of China. They're very much, it's a government run. It's a style of governance that is completely polar opposite of the American way, the Western culture. I don't think that puts us behind them or puts us at a disadvantage at all. However, we have to be more creative in our approach to defend ourselves against certain adversaries, because we have a certain code of ethics here in America that we abide by. Again, I don't think it's a disadvantage. I think that we just have to be more creative, where China does not. They don't have any of those parameters, and they can come at us as strong as they want to, and really nothing's stopping them, where we cannot approach them in that same way. But I want to say that as a country, though, with our intelligence sector, with the agencies, I still believe that we are in a good position. But none of us really know. I don't know what, any of those people are doing inside of the agencies that have the lifestyle policies that are the ones that are really truly protecting us. And China is definitely an adversary in certain ways. I know that they are number one import into America, but that doesn't matter. Their goal is the 100-year goal.
Yeah.
Like they have a 100-year plan. And so if you Google the 100-year plan, you will see, I think they launched it in the 60s. So they're coming up on it, and their goal is to be the number one power in the world. It's not just America, it's in the world. So Russia and all the other key players, they're wanting to take it out. That's just China. So all of those things are definitely considerations, but it's a good question, and it's a challenging one. It's, we're just defined by different laws and regulations, and they aren't.
Yeah. I think
it's like North Korea.
Yeah. They've got different rules of engagement when it comes to how they handle their political, social, economic, relationships with other countries. And I think that those different rules of engagements afford them certain advantages that they don't afford us, just like we have certain advantages, that work in our favor, especially in that realm. Yeah. Stuns and Roses. Just want to give a huge shout out to Stuns and Roses, who continues to do awesome content out there, in terms of putting out blog content and crushing those rooms on Try Hack Me and Hack the Box. Keep crushing it out there, Stuns and Roses. Your latest blog was really awesome. As a threat intel professional, what has been your most successful way of quantifying threats into potential profit loss?
That's an interesting question. Quantifying threats into a potential profit loss. I think go ahead, Neil.
No, go ahead.
So quantifying threats into a potential profit loss. What I would do, I'm putting on my business owner hat right now, not so much my analyst hat, because if I run an intelligence company, I did in the past. And when I look at that, that's how I think of this question. So I would quantify your threat by understanding what is your most critical infrastructure. What is the most critical asset on your infrastructure is a better way of posing that. At that point in time, then that's how I could, because I wouldn't be able to quantify it until I understood what is the most critical asset that you have. And then I could, at that point in time, figure out what their motivation would be to attack your network, and so the potential profit loss that client would have. That would be that's a very situational question. I'm like, man, I got to think about that one. That's a great question though, but that's definitely one where you sit down and you try to identify. First, you need to identify what are the assets that you need to protect, and what are the cost of these if these are lost or stolen or encrypted or exfilled out of here. What is that going to look like for you? And then at that point in time, you can figure that out.
For those who are reading around the bush, and I know this is BSEC's favorite term, that's ROI, right? Stuns and Roses is asking for an ROI on quantifying those threats. And to Jax's point, that's a really hard thing to do without understanding your crown jewels, your threat model, your vulnerabilities and things like that. So pretty much everything that goes into a cybersecurity program.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good question.
It was a really good question.
I'm trying to stall for my mod to push to the next. There she goes. There we go. Got it. Awesome. Spicy Hefe says, what qualities are most important in a person that are needed to be in a cyber threat and intelligence team?
Okay, quality. So there's an S there. So we're looking at
Do you think there's just one? You think there's just one?
No. I always look at words. So I'm like, all right, this individual is looking for multiple. And probably asking because they're curious about themselves.
Yes.
Possibly. Yep. So I would say, again, going back to soft skills, team environment, because right here, this question is needed to be in a cyber threat intelligence team. So you need to have everybody needs to have different diverse backgrounds, but a common knowledge of intelligence. That's a critical understanding of like how to develop the intelligence picture. Find, fixed, finish. Did I do that in right order? Yeah, the 3 Fs. It's starting to, we're crusting into that 2 hour mark now.
Yeah.
So common knowledge of intelligence, but then having a guy that's really good with reverse malware, having somebody that's really good with telling the story and understanding that story, and then bringing those all in and bringing them all together into a team environment. That's what I've saw as an extremely successful team environment where not everybody had similar skills, but each person had common knowledge where you had your subject matter experts, but everybody had a common baseline of understanding the intelligence picture. Yeah.
Is when we talk about those soft skills and those analytical skills, I think you highlighted a couple really good ones on there. What about the ability to speak upward to executive leadership and management?
Yeah, that's extremely important. You have to do it in a way that's tactful. It's like we like to say it in the military, very tactful, but have supporting evidence on why you say it. Like, you can't just say like, this doesn't work, or I don't like this idea. Quantify that. That is a big thing for executives. You need to have come with data and present that to them on why you think like maybe their way isn't the best approach, or maybe a different approach, or anything like that. But bring the data, show the numbers. They're all about numbers. You need to quantify anything that you're bringing forward to leadership. Yeah.
100%. Question from Lola, and again, congratulations, Lola, on your new gig. Today's stream questions have been brought to you by Cyber Lola. She did help prep the interview questions for you, Jax. So she is a personal fan of yours, 100%. Question for Jax: will you consider coming back to the cyber insecurity stream? We all could benefit a lot from your knowledge, and I feel 2 hours is just not enough.
You are awesome. I will definitely come back. I feel like I need to brush up on some intelligence things. You're hitting it. There were some things that I was like, man, I should be definitely brushed up on that question. So I'm gonna have to study a little bit more the next time. You think I'm joking? I'm gonna
we got a sharp crew here.
Yeah. Definitely, Lola. Thank you.
BSEC, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it again. Cybersecurity. If Jax isn't back, we are all going to boycott. All right, Jax. I mean, that's it. That's 2 live on stream. I think now you actually have a better following on my stream than Gerald does. You can take that back to him.
He's gonna love that. Yeah.
Jax, I think it goes without saying you've been an amazing guest tonight. Thank you so very much for gracing us with your presence, your wealth of knowledge. I do truly appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. You've got a book coming out with Gerald and a couple other folks called Cybersecurity Master Plan. You want to talk a little bit about that real quick?
Absolutely. We're so excited about this. This is a intro, and it's a book for anybody wanting to enter into cybersecurity, or anybody in cybersecurity interested in pivoting. And it's really broken down into 3 phases. And the first phase, the first section, 3 sections. The first section is to really get the readers to understand what is cybersecurity, the foundations, the NIST framework, SOC, OSI model, things like that. And then we really dive into understanding the different types of careers that you can pick from, and understanding certifications versus maybe going to a college environment. And then the last section is really about understanding how to brand yourself, how to find a mentor, how to goal set. So we love it. It's your one-stop shop for getting into cybersecurity. So we're on pre-sales. We're really looking at trying to hit 5,000 sales before September 9th when we go fully live, so we can get the bestsellers. Nice. So you have to hit 5,000 in a week after you go live. So yeah.
Okay, so we're definitely gonna put that out there to everybody who hears this. I saw the mods drop the link in chat. Go out there and pre-order their book. I'm about to encroach on a book journey myself, Jax. What are some tips you've got for me as I go down this path of writing my first book?
Oh my God. Well, first off, congratulations. Do it. Just be prepared to do nothing but write for the next 6 to 8 months of your life. That was literally it. I actually had to pause school for an entire term to do it. And I would say if you can find a co-author, this has been one of the most enjoyable experience. I was so happy when Gerald reached out to me to ask me to take part of this. I wouldn't want to do it any other way. My co-authors have been amazing. So the journey's been awesome. So definitely, So you're going to need 6 to 8 months, and then get a co-author, have somebody to do it with you. It's just better to, unless you're just super focused and you just want to write it all by
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. Jax, thanks so very much. Last
Absolutely.
chance. Say goodbye to my community here. Let them know any last thoughts that you've got on your mind.
Cyber and security community, thank you for the love. This has been amazing, and I look forward to coming back. You guys are awesome. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, everybody on the back end, and all your support.
Thank you, Jax. I'm gonna send you back to the green room. You can go ahead and log off. You and I'll chat next week sometime. For up-to-the-minute cybersecurity news, make sure you follow and subscribe to the Cyber and Security channel on Twitch and YouTube. Also, make sure you turn on those notifications so that you know when we go live.